It looks like we have people joining. Welcome, everybody. We'll get started in just a second here. I know it's a short session, but don't want to cut everyone off who are still joining. Okay, it looks like the number's slowing down, so I think we can go ahead and jump in. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for attending this session, Mind the Gap, IBAP's Diverse Curricula and Predicted Grades.
All right, so just to introduce, I'm Karmen Mallow. I'm the International Student Recruitment Officer for Imperial College London in the UK.
And I'm Haley Drogus with the University of Sheffield in the UK as well.
And I am Bridie Troy. I am the admissions manager for North America for University College Dublin, the largest university in Ireland. So today we're kind of helping you translate the US system to this international application system. And I will say that the largest difference between US and international admissions is probably in the type of review conducted by the two counseling offices. So in the United States, many universities utilize a holistic review, which considers a variety of factors in addition to the student's academic background. This would be a more qualitative approach. And it is worth noting that some holistic institutions are test optional, but they will consider test scores if submitted, which is why that box has a question mark in this little table right here. For many international universities, on the other hand, we are looking purely at the academic profile of the student using a more quantitative approach. Many UK universities combine these two methods, requiring a personal statement in the student's UCAS submission. They may also consider letters of recommendation or interviews, especially for clinical programs, which we will touch upon later. Now, for universities in Ireland and other European countries, we do focus more largely on a student's academic background. This would be high school GPA, SAT or ACT scores, or IB diplomas. While in the US, the students are encouraged to submit evidence of their extracurricular activities, these are generally not as important abroad. Essays, recommendation letters, and extracurricular activities would typically not be reviewed on as important of a basis as they would in the US, with the exception, again, of clinical courses that utilize this more holistic approach worldwide. Now, understanding the difference between these two review styles is critical in guiding students on how to prepare their applications effectively based on the systems used by the universities they're targeting. And that's what we're going to help you navigate today.
Awesome. So I'm going to take everyone through everyone's favorite thing, exams. This is going to be really for your students that are applying to UK universities. So one thing is that all of these exams, they're not going to be used by every program that offers that course, or every university that offers that course, or every university. So it's really important that students are looking at the program pages for the program that they're planning on applying to. Just to go through some of the bigger exams. So LNAT is going to be used by a lot of law programs in the UK. Again, it's not going to be every law program, but students will need to plan ahead if they have to take that exam. For medicine, that might be the UCAT. There is the GAMSAT as well, but that's for more students that have completed an undergrad degree and are going into a graduate medicine course. So if you're working with high school students, you are most likely going to be using the UCAT exam. For TMUA, that's going to be a math-related exam. So it's used by a lot of programs that include math, economics, computer science. It's currently used by Imperial, Cambridge, and UCL as of this year. ESAT exam, that one actually has 5 modules. So it's going to be courses like Math 1, there's going to be physics, other modules related to engineering courses. Students typically don't take all 5 modules. They're going to take 2 to 3 depending on the program. So again, really important that students are looking ahead and knowing that they're registering for the correct ones. And that's currently used by, TMUA, I forgot to mention there's other universities like Durham and Warwick using it as well, but ESAT is going to be just Cambridge, Imperial, and UCL currently. PARA is a new exam. It's only being used by UCL, but it's going to test different things like related to essential skills for studying. So it could be humanities programs that require it, but it could be some STEM courses as well. And there are some exams if your students are applying to Oxford or Cambridge that might be outside of these. So it's really important that, again, if they're applying to one of those 2 universities, that they look at the university courses pages. So I'm going to go through a few things not related to necessarily Oxford exams, but the other 5 that I mentioned. So things that students are going to have to prepare and consider, the exams are going to be taken at a Pearson View Center. So when they are on the exam website registering,
they're going to be able to pick a center that will be in their area. They won't have to travel too far. If you do have students that are having issues finding a center in their area, please do reach out to the university. We track those issues every year, so it's good for us to know so we can communicate with Pearson VUE about those. As far as the results, when students take the UCAT, they do get those results the day of the exam. So that's helpful because the students do apply for the earlier UCAS deadline, and medical programs in the UK can be really competitive for international students. Having that score ahead of time, they're able to kind of pre-screen courses that they're going to be eligible for. So having that ahead of time is useful. For the others, there are going to be set release dates listed on the website. One thing to note is that the universities might actually get the exam results before the student does. So students should just reference that website to know when they'll get their test scores after the exam. As far as preparation, all of the websites are going to have resources like test example questions. There's going to be some, like UCAS has a personalized preparation tool that students can make a plan. There might be some also like videos of students have taken the exam before to help them prepare. We really aren't expecting students to sign up for a separate prep course or buy exam materials. Everything should be on the website that they need to prepare for the exams. Some universities as well are going to require specific test dates. So if students are taking LNET and applying to certain universities, they might have to register for a certain exam date. With TUMU and ESAT2, if students are applying to Cambridge, there's 2 test dates in October and January. And if they apply to Cambridge, they do have to take that October date. So really important, again, for students to reference the pages. Fees are going to depend, obviously, on conversion rates, but in the exam that the students are taking, but they should be prepared to pay about $140 to $160 for the exams. Another thing not specific to UK necessarily, but a lot of our universities will look for interviews or auditions depending on the type of program they're applying to. Some of us will do virtual. So at Imperial, all of our interviews currently for international students are virtual, but some universities might have, you know, an in-person day in New York or LA or San Francisco, and they'll have students like fly in or come into the auditions or interviews in person then. The format, it's really going to depend on the type of program. So I'll go into those a little bit more on the next slide, but there'll be auditions, portfolio reviews. For STEM, there might be a couple different formulas. For medicine, veterinary science, and dentistry, they'll often use multiple mini interviews. Some tips for students is really review your application. We might ask questions about your personal statement, your motivations for studying the course. So really going back and reviewing what you wrote when you applied through UCAS or whatever application you're using for universities outside the UK. Definitely show passion. We want to see your motivation and that you're excited to study in these courses. You demonstrate your knowledge in the program. Really during that, like prepare some questions for the program. We want you to use this as an opportunity to make sure that we're going to be the best fit for you. Definitely if you are working in a school or like you're an IEC and you have the ability to help students prepare with interview skills, or maybe just, you know, prepping the student to prepare with their family a bit. And definitely relax. Like, you know, the interviews can be stressful, but we want to see students, you know, wear something comfortable, you know, take a little bit of time to relax before preparing. I know definitely it can be a little stressful for students if they're not, you know, blinking out on the exam or the interview day. So, all right, next slide, please. All right, so looking more at the formula or the format, sorry. So some will, depending on the program, like auditions, that might be more for drama. For interviews, there's a couple different formats again. So medicine, dentistry, and veterinary science, they'll use multiple mini interviews. So those are typically where students have different stations that they're doing. Depending on the university, they might be completely live interviews. Some of them might be asynchronous where students have to upload like a video or some kind of material beforehand. Oftentimes they're going to be one-to-one, but they might have some too where they're paired with a couple other applicants because we want to see their ability to collaborate in the lab and their teamwork that way. But the questions that could be asked are, you know, related to sciences, like medicine. They might be more ethical questions that we give them a situation. For STEM at Imperial, most of our programs do have interviews. Those can, again, vary format depending on the program. For example, design interview, that's typically, or sorry, design engineering. Their interview is typically 30 minutes, and students really just have like a one-to-one interview and they bring a couple creative examples. But some of them might be a half day too, where we have an applicant day, they can talk to current students, we give them a group activity, they'll have some individual interviews. So again, it will really depend on the program. And I'll hand it off to Haley, who can talk more about portfolios and auditions.
Thanks, Carmen. Yes, so for things like portfolios, you're really looking at courses like architecture, some sort of art, design. These will definitely require portfolios at most institutions. And it's not necessarily that they have to show that they're already a pro, but they're looking for, what form of creative outlet do they typically use, or what is the level of advancement that they're already at within design or that creative outlet. So it's really important that students just follow the directions, because typically there will be a specific requirement of, for architecture, we want to see 9 different examples across different outlets. So it could be like a free-form design, it could be just a sketch of the exterior of a building. So it really depends, and it just gives the academics who are reviewing the portfolios a better idea of what to expect from this applicant at the start of the program if they're admitted. And then for things like auditions, typically it's just going to be a submitting a tape, if you will. So typically you're just going to need to record yourself as the student for things like dance, music, other performance degrees. If anything else, they'll want to have a virtual in real time call, but they typically do not require students to go abroad. But again, there's that caveat. You just have to check each university that the student is applying for, that what the entry criteria are for them. And then moving on. All right, so I can start, Karmen, if that works. And then, so for equivalence to UK A levels and Irish Leaving Cert for this next portion, for the high school diploma, for the UK A levels are not a direct equivalent to the US high school diploma. So it's really important for both counselors, students, and families to really understand what each university requires in terms of entry criteria. And so looking at the different options to find equivalence, if a student is taking or completing an IB diploma, that is widely accepted internationally. So it's, I wouldn't say favorable in that, that would get accepted over something else, but it is very much easier for us to be able to review and accept because it is so widely used across the globe. And then for things like AP, so advanced placement exams, again, this will depend on what university a student is applying to, but typically you're going to find 3 to 5 APs required, typically strong scores of 4 or 5, because that is more so equivalent to A levels. And Karmen, I didn't know if you had anything else to add.
Yeah, I just add, as far as APs, like we will always have on the program page too, if there's specific APs. So especially with STEM, we're going to require, maybe Calc BC for certain programs or physics. If you do have students too that maybe are taking the IB diploma and your school or the student doesn't have the access to a certain higher level, definitely contact our admissions team ahead of time, just because we can kind of talk through students about policies or what we would have in lieu of that if we kind of accept a standard level. For UK schools, especially since we have limited option or amount of applications they can put on the UCAS, we definitely want to make sure they're maximizing which ones they apply to. So, yeah, I think that's all I had to add.
Perfect, thank you. All right,
Great,
next slide
thank you. So the Irish Leaving Certificate is the standard exam in Ireland, and it is equivalent in standards to the UK A levels, but the comparison can seem a bit confusing when you first look at it. So the Irish Leaving Certificate, or the ILC, is an end-of-year huge national exam that all secondary students take in Ireland, generally scored out of 600 points. And a standard US high school diploma is often considered broadly equivalent to the ILC, but it's really important to understand it typically cannot equate to the full 600 points that an Irish student might earn on the ILC. Now, this pyramid on the right can show the best ways that a US or a Canadian student can build up their application. So we'll start with the bottom tier here, the US high school diploma. Now, this is the minimum requirement to apply for most international universities. However, it's usually not sufficient on its own for more competitive programs such as law, psychology, computer science, engineering, all of which might require additional materials to boost an application. When looking at a US high school transcript, counselors should ensure that students submit unweighted cumulative GPAs, as that's what most universities outside of the US evaluate. I know many high schools only provide a weighted average on a student's transcript, so it is worth explaining the difference between an unweighted GPA and a weighted GPA before the student applies so that they can understand which GPA that the international university will be using. Now in the middle tier, we see ACT or SATs. I know a lot of US universities are going test optional. We are still going to see some programs as test optional internationally. However, like I said, for more competitive ones, this will still definitely benefit a student to have. Now, these standardized tests typically support applications by supplementing the high school diploma and the GPA and helping a student to meet subject requirements, typically for mathematics. Some international universities do still require these for certain programs, especially if a student doesn't have AP or IB exam results. On this top tier, we do have AP and IB exams. These subject-specific exams can help a student meet course-specific entry requirements. For example, if a student is applying for an engineering course in the UK, they might need AP Calculus or IB higher level mathematics. Now, I know my colleagues touched on this on the last slide, so I won't belabor the point, but I would really love to highlight in the Irish context, as I'm sure many of you work with IB students. So the IB diploma is typically the most directly comparable to the A-levels or the ILC. Because of its international structure, the IB diploma is widely accepted and recognized globally as a rigorous university preparatory curriculum. So if a student has the IB diploma, they typically do not need to present with these other exams such as AP, ACT, or SAT. The IB can work for all of those. So my advice is really encourage students to check our individual university websites for exact requirements, especially for competitive or specialized courses like medicine, engineering, or law. In opposition to many US admissions, many of our international programs have different entry requirements, even within the same university. So whereas in the US, a student might apply to U of I, University of Illinois, and then choose their major from there, at University College Dublin, you would apply to University College Dublin Business Program or University College Dublin Law Program. So you apply to your specific major, and there are different entry requirements depending on what major the student is going into. So helping students understand how their curriculum compares to these international standards really helps your students improve their chances of admission abroad and helps them manage their expectations.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Bridie. So over to dual enrollment. So this and university and college courses are often going to be something that students take rather than APs, whether APs aren't offered for them, of course, or they think that that's a route that they will achieve a better score at. Not everyone is created equal in terms of test taking. That's what I always think. So for things like this, if a university in the UK or abroad somewhere does require AP exams, they may also accept dual enrollment and or university or college classes taken in lieu of APs. So it's very common to see that exact wording on like a USA page for a university for those students applying. Some universities may just outright accept a combination of any of them. So they'll say, well, we just require 3. So if a student did great on one AP and then they were able to do 2 more through dual enrollment, or just go to their local community college or local university or study online, then we can accept those at the other 2 in a combination. And then this can often be found on, like I said, the USA or Canada country page for a university. So if you just typically type in USA or United States or go to international students, it might separate by country. You can typically very easily find this information because again, every university is different, of course. So you'll just really want to check on that your student is able to achieve and meet the entry criteria for each of their options that they choose to apply to. And then of course, when in doubt, ask the rep. So of course, this summit is for AIRR-NA. We are all listed on the member directory, which is a public page on our website. So please do utilize that. You can find any of our university profiles, as well as the contacts and reps per region or for the university overall who's a member of AIRR-NA. So it's very easy to find our contact details and get in touch with us. And we're more than happy to help because that's what we're here for. Okay, there we go.
Great, thank you. I know we have some Canadian counselors on this call, and I want to promise that we did not forget about you. So today we're also going to discuss how secondary school diplomas from different Canadian provinces can equate to UK A-levels or the Irish Leaving Certificate. Now, as you know, if you work with Canadian students, Canada does not have a single national curriculum. Instead, each province has its own education system, assessments, and grading scales. Typically, Canadian students applying to colleges abroad are evaluated on grade 12 results or their grade 11 results, which can be used as a predictor for grade 12 if they have not yet graduated. Most provinces do use a percentage grading system, often out of 100. And for most of these provinces, we are going to calculate the average of 5 acceptable, meaning academic and non-vocational subjects, to figure out this average when we're looking into their degree requirements. One of the biggest things to remember in advising Canadian students looking at universities abroad is that provincial differences do really matter. So what might be the best advice for a student from British Columbia will be very different for a student from Manitoba. For the most part, we are looking at the average grades across 5 to 6 subjects, the course levels. For example, in Ontario, we would be looking for UM and C level distinctions and the credit load for each subject. So feel free to take a screenshot of this chart kindly provided by the University of Sheffield, but remember that our entry requirements are listed on most of our web pages. And that's what we're here for. We're here to answer any questions that you might have about your specific province and the program that your student is looking at.
Thanks, Bridie. And again, just as she said, like this is just one example, but I figured it pretty much just summed it up in terms of we truly all follow a table and want to cater it to where the students are from. And then last but not least, we have predicted grades. So many universities abroad do require predicted grades, especially with students applying for university while they're, of course, in their final year of high school. So this could be for APs or for all final class grades. So again, as everything else, it typically just depends uni to uni, course to course. Predicted grades should not be inflated from a student's current scores or what is possible of the student achieving. So it's really important to remember inflated scores could jeopardize the student's conditional offer when they provide final grades and APs. You don't want a student to think that, you know, they are set, they're just waiting for those final results to come in, they've already applied for accommodation, they might have already completed some other steps only to find out that they unfortunately are not fully admitted once they graduate and show final proof of scores because potentially they did not do nearly as well as those predicted scores were upon application submission. So it's really important to make sure that your student is not being set up for failure in terms of those in terms of potential inflation. And then if your school has a strict no predicted grades policy, as I am aware, we are all aware that some schools do have that, students and counselors can either write a letter to the universities that a student is applying to explaining or just not submit. This can be a risk as universities may not provide an application decision if they consider the application incomplete without the predicted grades. So it's something where, again, you'll just want to try to get in touch with the rep for that university. We can often help provide information around that to our admissions teams to ensure that there's an understanding. They might be able to work something out on the back end so that a student just isn't automatically waived in terms of their application not being reviewed for consideration. So when in doubt, again, just ask the rep and we'll see if there's anything we can do to assist around questions for predicted grades or not being able to submit them. All right, and I think that was it. 1 minute early.
Great. I do see that we have quite a few questions. I've been trying to answer them as they came in, but we are running out of time just because we had so much to tell you. So I will look at all these questions, but please reach out to us if we haven't gotten to your question. That's what we're here for. We love to talk to you.
Yes, thank you all so much for attending. We will try to answer these questions in the next minute here.
Yes, great. I do see a couple questions about specific UK exams, if you don't mind me asking Karmen and Haley. Would you recommend that a student going into nursing or dentistry take the UCAT?
So it'll depend on the university they're applying to, but often those courses will still require it, yes.
Yes, agreed.
Wonderful. And also, as far as predicted grades go, when are they due for your university? So for our universities, we really like to have those predicted grades in as soon as possible. I know usually this is the start of the second semester before you can give like a realistic idea of them, but we do like to have them earlier on so that we can issue that decision to the student. Are you guys
Oh,
similar?
Yeah, so for Sheffield and other UK universities that I've worked for, predicted grades are due in order to submit the application. So it is a component that's needed in order for admissions to be able to review for a potential conditional offer.
Agreed.
Great, thank you. Another one specifically for you two. Do international students need to come in person to the UK if specific exams are required?
So for the exams I mentioned on that side, those can all be done in the US at the Pearson VUE centers. They would not need to travel to the UK for those. But again, Oxbridge, I'm not sure. I would definitely have to refer to their pages.
Mhm. Yes, there might be some specific Oxbridge ones that you would need to travel for, but typically for the most part, most things are going to be able to be done at a center in the US or wherever you're based, or online.
Wonderful, thank you. Oh, this is a great question. Are homeschooled applicants successful in UCAS? And do you have any recommendations for applicants who have been homeschooled?
I can jump in with, I've had quite a few homeschooled applicants over the years, and I would say that they are more than welcome to apply. This shouldn't be looked at as something that should be a challenge to them. The one thing that I will say is make sure that you are able to get that academic reference, because a lot of us will require an academic reference, and unfortunately, a parent who is providing the homeschooling at home would not count.
Yes, I completely agree for the Irish system as well. I see one question says, would you say US students without IB would have more success when applying in the fall or winter of their senior year, or would they do better to take a gap year? US students without an IB can definitely apply their senior year. If we are still waiting on them to meet certain subject requirements through AP exams, we can always issue offers conditional on meeting those scores. They do not have to take a gap year before they apply. Is that the same with your universities?
Yeah, absolutely. The students taking IB in the UK also would be waiting for those scores. So I would just like to tack onto that too. I think a lot of students ask me if a gap year would be detrimental to their application. And I think it's so common in the UK, like really, we don't look at it as, we just would want more information about what the students had done in that gap year. So
No, same here. I do see one question here that's interesting. What if the dual enrollment or class for entry criteria is unrelated to the course? Example, a student applies to STEM but has an additional dual enrollment in humanities. So if a course that a student is applying to requires specific classwork or a specific topic for AP's dual enrollment university class, then it will specify. So typically for STEM, we are going to need calculus A, B, or BC or calc equivalent from dual enrollment or university. If they're applying to humanities, social sciences, then those would be able to be taken into account. But oftentimes they'll just have two that they require. So if it is STEM, a math, a science, and then they might say, we'll accept the third in anything. So again, unfortunately, I know we say this a lot, but it just depends course to course and uni to uni for that entry criteria, but it's always great to check.
Thank you. And I think we do have to go because we have another session, but thank you all so much for joining, and please reach out to us if we did not have a chance to get to your question.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks.